"We are so back" is the phrase that I have heard for months now across all Battlefield 6 content. Gameplay videos, reaction videos, in comment sections, and across my timeline. And you know what? I think people are actually onto something here, which is wild for me to say because we are talking about a military shooter and that is so far outside of my usual territory and my skill set, if we are being totally honest. Basically, my entire competitive FPS experience is grinding Overwatch 1. Pour one out. And that is it. That is my resume. So me being genuinely invested in the success of Battlefield 6, even I am slightly confused about it. But as a nonpartisan, third-party outsider, I have been observing this situation unfold for a couple of months now. And look, I know that the game literally just launched to a massive queue, by the way, and we are in the very early days here, but based on what I'm seeing and hearing so far, I think that what is happening right now might actually mean something bigger for gaming as a whole. Quick housekeeping note, I am doing our 200,000 celebration Q&A at the end of this video, and you guys asked some genuinely great questions, so make sure to stick around if you'd like to check that out. But first, let's talk Battlefield. So when did I start paying attention to this? Well, a Battlefield 6 trailer dropped ahead of the beta this past August, and I watched it and got full-body goosebumps. There was just something about it, even though again, it's not really my type of game personally. The pure testosterone energy, the brotherhood mentality, the gritty explosions, chaos, tactical warfare, it was really awesome and refreshing to see. Something about it very much worked. It felt confident, very focused, like they knew exactly what they were making and who they were making it for. There wasn't any of that forced, we're trying to include and appeal to everybody type energy. It was just unapologetically Battlefield. Then the beta dropped shortly after that, and I started watching gameplay footage, which, sidebar, it was slightly hard for me to follow everything happening on my screen at times just because I'm not really familiar with it. I'm talking 64 players, buildings collapsing, vehicles everywhere, explosions coming from every direction. I had a full Willem Dafoe moment looking up to the sky, just watching it. But what really made me start to pay attention wasn't the gameplay itself, it was the fan reactions. I think that I've developed what I'm calling secondhand hype, and it's when you get so excited for people about something that isn't necessarily for you, and I have been experiencing this hardcore with Battlefield fans because this wasn't your typical new game excitement. It felt like a big sigh of relief. People weren't saying, wow, cool new features. They were saying things like, did EA actually listen? And this feels like Battlefield again. That, again, is doing so much work in the sentence. It is the difference between finally something new and finally we got our thing back. That's kind of what this feels like. So far, it seems that EA looked at what fans have been asking for, what they had missed on previous Battlefield games. Ultimately, at its core, what makes this franchise special, and has appeared to just do more of that, which sounds so simple, right? But in modern AAA gaming, giving people what they want is kind of a revolutionary concept. We have gotten so used to being told what we should want, what's innovative, what is the future of gaming, and meanwhile, people are just like, okay, but can we have the thing we liked? Can we just have that back? And with Battlefield 6, so far, it looks like the answer could actually be yes. And you can normally tell when something is made with respect for the audience versus when it's not and it's designed by committee. And this feels like the former, and I think that may be why people are genuinely having so much fun. I also saw that many people stayed strong and did not pre-order and waited for the actual reviews. Now that the game just launched, early impressions are very positive. Yes, servers are packed, people are jumping in, but that hope and relief that people were feeling brings me to an issue that has been happening across AAA gaming for years. But most recently, something I noticed in Call of Duty. I mentioned this briefly in my last video, but in the new COD, they proudly announced a cat cafe location in their military shooter. Now, listen, I love cozy games, but that announcement did not attract me to COD in the slightest, and from what I saw, it just confused and irritated their existing players. Understandably, like, who is this for exactly? It was kind of off-putting, to be honest, and nobody ever wins in that type of situation. It is just a perfect small example of studios making decisions that seem to appeal to nobody. Not their core audience, not potential new players, just floating in this weird limbo of trying to appeal to everybody. Again, that is just one example of a much bigger pattern that we have been watching for years now. On top of all the technical problems, unfinished games, predatory monetization, injection of modern ideologies into everything, we are watching beloved franchises get twisted into something that their fans don't even recognize anymore. And with $70 games creeping up on $80 games, thank you Nintendo, this is a bad place to be in. And I read recently that more than 60% of US gamers only buy 2 games or fewer per year. That is it. That is all so many people can afford or justify. So when you are one of those 2 games, you'd better be worth it. You had better be competing to win that spot. Instead, we are watching AAA studios act like they don't even want to compete anymore. Like they are just entitled to our money, just because they're a big name franchise. Have you noticed this? Everyone's hyping everyone else's games on social media, doing the whole supportive colleague thing. All of the Ghost of Yote marketing was honestly a bit nauseating with this, and I know many of you already know that I don't like that game, and that's probably why it impacted me so hard, but the Assassin's Creed shout out was probably the worst one because I'm not sure that that's the game that you want hyping you up. Battlefield actually did this type of approach differently. They poked fun at Call of Duty, and it was great. That is the energy that we need, that confidence that we know who we are and we know who our competition is, and we are not afraid to call it out mentality. I'm hoping that that confidence shows through in the game itself, that it is not trying to be everything to everyone, it's just hopefully being a really good version of what it is supposed to be. A military shooter with awesome maps, vehicle combat, and that specific battlefield chaos and strategy that fans love. For the most part, the AAA bar, especially in the West, is on the floor. And somehow the fact that EA might actually be the ones to clear that is remarkable. That's where we are right now. And their clarity of purpose, the we know exactly who our audience is and we are making this specifically for them energy, is what we've been missing. Here is what I keep wondering, and part of the reason I am very invested in this game. Could this be a part of something bigger happening right now? I know EA just went private in a $55 billion deal, and setting all of that aside, knowing Battlefield 6 was in development long before that happened, could this somehow still be their statement game? Their we're doing things differently now moment? Is this the first small step in moving past all of the previous nonsense? The broken launches, the aggressive monetization, the building for audiences that don't exist while ignoring the ones that do. Now look, the game just launched, and I know servers are packed, and I certainly am not a Battlefield expert by any means, and I know that this series has gone through rough patches before, so I am being cautiously optimistic for Battlefield fans here. But if they did do something different, if this launch holds, if the positive early reactions translate into sustained success, I don't know. Speaking of doing things differently, Sandfall Interactive just celebrated over 5 million copies sold for Clay Obscure, and what did they do? They announced a completely free DLC, $0, as a thank you for supporting us, here's more game. They probably looked at the Larian Studios playbook, How to Respect Your Fans 101, and just followed it. What do these two successes have in common? They listened. They valued player feedback. They did not try to squeeze every last dollar out of people or preach at them or make them feel bad for just wanting escapism. They just made something really good and treated their audience like human beings who deserve respect. It's almost like when you treat your audience well, they will show up for you. When you deliver quality and respect their time and money, they support you. When you have the confidence to compete for their attention, they notice. If Battlefield 6 really does deliver, other studios are going to notice. They are going to see that this approach works, that sometimes the answer is as simple as know who you are, make it really well for the people who actually want it, and have the confidence to compete for them. Maybe we are starting to see a shift here, where listen to your community, make good games for them, and actually compete to win them over becomes the norm instead of the exception. Now, I am not saying one game will fix everything, not at all. But it could be a signpost, a proof of concept, evidence that there is a viable path forward that does not involve everything gamers have been voicing concerns about for years. So, are we actually back? I don't know. But what is happening with Battlefield 6 isn't really about military shooters specifically. It's more about what happens when a studio finally listens to their fans, when they build something for their community with care and quality, when they respect the people who have been showing up, giving feedback, hoping things would get better. They're not always gonna get it right. And Battlefield fans, they truly have been through it. They have stuck around through disappointments, through feedback that seemed ignored, through years of maybe next time. And that is loyalty, very much real loyalty, and that deserves to be rewarded. Whether you are a longtime Battlefield fan who has been through all the ups and downs and is cautiously hyped right now, or you're like me, an outsider who just wants to see good things happen in gaming, I think we are all asking the same question. Is this finally the turning point? Honestly, if Battlefield 6 sticks the landing, if this positive launch momentum holds, we definitely could be, or at least headed in that direction. Battlefield fans who have been waiting, I am rooting for you so hard. You deserve this, and I hope this game is everything that you have been asking for. And for the rest of us, I hope this is the beginning of a trend. If this is a success, I hope other studios see that and realize that respect and listening actually work, that you can just make a good game for people who actually want that game. And maybe I am naive and getting my hopes up, but I am choosing to be hopeful that this succeeds because we deserve better. And it seems like maybe, we might actually be starting to get it. So as I mentioned earlier, over 300 of you dropped questions in the pinned comment for the Q&A, and I promised that I would answer them at the end of this video. I will try to keep things moving and hit as many as I can. I kind of did my best to group them into different categories so I could hit on a couple of things at once. All right, let's go. A lot of you asked about the origin story. Why did I start YouTube? What finally pushed me to do it? It's really that gaming has been a part of my life for almost as long as I can remember. It has impacted every area: my childhood, my relationship with my siblings and friends, my marriage. My husband actually used to be a Twitch streamer, and that's how we met. But I have developed just such a deep love for this hobby and this industry over the years, and it finally got to the point where I was like, okay, enough is enough. I guess let me start actually doing something with this passion. What sparked the channel is I wanted to praise what's good, maybe talk about things that I missed, speak up about what I find concerning. Basically just talking about stuff that I have been witnessing and experiencing from the background. Hence the name, TheBackgroundNPC, because that's kind of what it's felt like for so long, just watching everything happen around me. The biggest hurdle to start was probably hitting record. I am not a naturally confident public speaker. I get very sweaty and tongue-tied when I have to talk in front of people, the whole deal. But when it is just me and a camera and I have had time to kind of write down my thoughts into a script, it's a lot easier and way more manageable, kind of like talking to a friend. How did the blow up change things? And what was it like when Asmongold covered your video? The growth has been very surreal, going from my 300 Spartans to over 200,000 in what feels like a blink. My day-to-day hasn't really changed. There is definitely a new awareness that people are listening to me. And when Asmongold and other really kind creators picked up that original Problem with Women in Games video, I could not believe it. Honestly, my initial reaction was panic, but I truly am so grateful because it has brought me this wonderful and amazing community here. And my main goal is to do my best to keep the culture positive and focused on things that we love without being afraid to, speak truthfully and honestly about things that I don't like and problems that I have with our industry. What is next for the channel? Any plans for streaming or collaborations? Moving forward, I am planning more video essays, maybe some shorter breakdowns and content, and I am considering streaming. Probably it would be on YouTube if I did it, but we will see. As for collaborations, maybe. Again, I will be very honest with you. I do get very nervous speaking publicly. Speaking to a camera alone is fine, but in an interview or a guest spot, I can get a little bit tongue-tied. A lot of you have asked questions about my setup, if I have any type of professional experience, which is always such a compliment, by the way. Thank you for saying that. But to answer your questions, no, I'm not a professional. I've never been on TV or anything like that. I have been training as a voice actor for the last 4 years, so whenever I do see people commenting about my voice, it actually is very sweet. I did just have a very fun voiceover project go live. I will link that for you in the description if you'd like to check that out. Someone asked, what type of games do you love to play, and what are your all-time favorites? It's a range for me. I really enjoy action adventures, RPGs, JRPGs, cozy sims, indies, and I am also a huge scaredy cat when it comes to horror. I really do not do horror games except for Resident Evil, which I love. I know, it's totally contradictory. I am huge into the lore and to the characters and the world of Resident Evil, and it really just kind of grabbed me and sucked me in. And if we are talking all-time favorite games ever, then Majora's Mask, Red Dead Redemption 2, Skyrim, and Elden Ring. Elden Ring was actually my kind of big introduction to the Souls-like genre, and now I am very hooked. These days, I do mostly play on PC. That's kind of always my preference. I did used to have a PS4, sold that, and I have never owned an Xbox, but I still have my original Switch. What are your first gaming memories, and what was the first game that you 100% completed? My earliest memory is probably watching my older brother play Ocarina of Time. I was just a little tot. Funnily enough, that ended up being the first game that I 100% completed. And as I got older, that game actually got me into a phase where I was obsessed with speedrunning for a while, and I even went to GDQ twice and volunteered at one of the events. It was definitely an interesting opportunity. What game first made you cry? That's Kingdom Hearts for sure. When Sora, Kairi, and Riku all get separated at the end of the first game, little me was absolutely a wreck. That was kind of my first experience with a JRPG, and it hit totally different. What game characters have impacted you the most, and what are your desert island picks? Characters that really impacted me, I've talked about them before, but Wander from Shadow of the Colossus, Arthur Morgan, obviously, and then probably Aerith. And I'm sure that there's many more than that, but those are 3 that have really stayed with me for a long time. If I did have to pick a couple titles for a deserted island, that's pretty tough, but I think I would have to go with Breath of the Wild for sure. Just the endless exploration and discovery never gets old for that game. Then maybe Undertale, because I don't think I've ever been so charmed by a game that I knew absolutely nothing about when I first started playing. And then probably Baldur's Gate 3 for that really deep RPG experience with basically infinite replay value. Now, I know a lot of you follow the channel for takes on the industry, so let's get into that. First question being, how do you approach controversial or spicy topics? And I do try really hard to stay understanding and give like a fair, measured take on something, even when I'm frustrated by it. My goal is never to be purely incendiary just for clicks. I genuinely do care a lot about these things, and I want to have real conversations about this stuff. But I also know that we won't all agree on everything, and that is totally okay. I do enjoy reading people's feedback and their thoughts on things, whether or not they agree with me. I will say there are definitely lines for me though, and that's typically when a studio's behavior crosses into exploiting players or is just exemplifying just like bad or toxic behavior, and that's kind of when I feel the need to speak up about stuff. For example, choosing not to buy the Switch 2 or current Nintendo products because I'm not loving how they're treating their fan base and their competition as a whole. If you had a dream budget, what would you pitch to AAA? If I had a dream budget and I could pitch something to AAA CEOs, I would probably take that budget and go give it to some indie studios to help make their dreams come true. At my core, I really just want to let truly creative people make something that they are passionate about and that they have a real dream and vision for. This next section gets a little bit more personal, so can you talk about your faith? How does it shape your content? Yes, I am a Christian, and my faith definitely shapes how I approach content, what I play, how I talk about it, why I care about stories so much, and how I aim to treat other people in this space. How do you balance YouTube with everything else in life? I do work full-time, actually. I have a day job in marketing, so balancing YouTube with everything else can be a lot. But my biggest tip for staying sane, and something that I need to take my advice on far more often, is just staying off of social media unless I am actively researching a specific topic. I find that the more I am on social media, the more cynical I get. For me personally, it's best to just take a breather. All right, moving on into anime and animation. Somebody asked, what anime are you watching? Do you have any favorites or recommendations? Currently, I am making my way through Solo Leveling. I did just see Demon Slayer Infinity Castle in theaters, and listen, it was a great movie. The animation was beautiful, the fight sequences were a ton of fun. My only complaint was maybe that the last 30 to 40 minutes of the movie, it was all backstory. But you know what? I love a good backstory, and I know that that is something that's very prevalent in anime. If you like Demon Slayer, you're gonna like the movie. My all-time favorite anime has to be Attack on Titan, which I know that seems like a cop-out answer, but it really is true. I have been hard-pressed to find a story that has been so intricately woven and developed and evolved over the years, and something that has impacted me quite like that show. I've also been really into K-dramas. I recently watched Crash Landing on You, and oh my gosh, that show hits very hard. So if you're interested in a K-drama, that's a really good one to start with. My favorite animated film of all time is probably The Prince of Egypt. That is just a beautifully done movie, and the soundtrack is absolutely gorgeous. Speaking of soundtracks that I love, my favorite video game soundtrack is probably The Elder Scrolls, and specifically Skyrim. And even more specifically, it is the Dawnguard DLC. When you go to the Forgotten Vale area, there is this track that plays that is so gorgeous, and for whatever reason, they did not include it in their official album, so you have to do some digging to find it. But luckily for you, if you're interested, I will also link it in the description below so you can take a listen. To close this out, I will do kind of some rapid fire one-off questions that I saw, starting with favorite color, probably yellow. Favorite food, sushi, pineapple on pizza. Yes, I love a good Hawaiian pizza. Waffles or pancakes? Waffles. Favorite holiday? It's Christmas. Favorite Pokemon? Eevee. SpongeBob episodes that you quote. I grew up watching SpongeBob, and one that always pops into my head is from the Panty Raid episode, when SpongeBob and Patrick are with Mr. Krabs and they go, "Are you feeling it now, Mr. Krabs?" Okay, that was a lot, but if you've made it this far, thank you so much, and I hope that I covered most of the topics that were brought up. If I did miss your question, I'm very sorry. Thank you again so much for being here, for all of the questions, and for the support. You truly make this worth doing, and I will see you in the next one.